Good evening. We are going into close this evening, so we have a motion to convene in closed meeting, and I will now read the recommendation. That a closed meeting of council be held on June 26, 2023 at 6 p.m. in accordance with Section 239(2)F of the Municipal Act 2001 to consider the following. Drainage matter 239(2)F advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for all that purpose. May I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Cressman. Sorry about that. And the motion, all in favor? And the motion carries. And welcome to our council meeting held on June 26, 2023. We have a motion to reconvene in open meeting. I will now read the recommendation. The council reconvenes in open session at 7 p.m. May I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Sadhu, seconded by Councillor Martin. And I will now call the vote. All in favor? Motion is carried unanimously. For a moment of reflection this evening, tomorrow, June 27th, is Canadian Multiculturalism Day. We recognize and celebrate the many cultural communities that help build a strong and vibrant Canada. It is essential to enhance the awareness of cultural diversity throughout the Township of Wilmot as we work together to honor the values of equality, mutual respect, and inclusion that make our community a great place to live. Canada Day is also quickly approaching. Canada Day is a time to celebrate and appreciate the beautiful country we live in, and we take a moment to show gratitude for the opportunities and freedoms we enjoy as Canadians. However you may choose to recognize July 1st, let's be mindful and respectful. Let's continue to work together towards an even stronger and more inclusive Canada. For more information about events happening in Wilmot through Canada Day weekend, please visit wilmot.ca/community calendar. Now we will move to the territorial acknowledgement. Councillor Cressman.
We have gathered in Wilmot Township on the traditional territory of the Neutral, Haudenosaunee, Haudenosaunee, and Mississauga peoples. We also want to acknowledge the importance of the Dish with One Spoon Covenant, a peace agreement made between Indigenous nations before the Europeans arrived. It characterized our collective responsibility to each other and Mother Earth. We would take only what we need, leave enough for others, and keep the dish clean. By acknowledging this covenant and the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples, we are reminded of our important connection to this land where we live, learn, and work together as a community.
Thank you, Councillor Cressman. Now we'll move to disclosure of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict Act. Does any member of council have a disclosure of pecuniary interest they would like to declare? Seeing none, we move on. Additions to the agenda. We have 4 additions to the agenda. Item 13.6, correspondence from Peter Wordle regarding Bamberg Creek, Janana, and Cook Lease Municipal Drain. Item 13.7, correspondence from the Gord Mills of the New Hamburg Firebirds requesting for support. Item 14.2, Bylaw 2023-XX, being a bylaw to provide the drainage works of construction and improvement of the Bamberg Creek, Janana, and Cook Lease Municipal Drain. Item 14.3, Bylaw 2023-XX, being a bylaw to confirm an establishment of a highway in the Township of Wilmot, Joseph Street Road widening. And I'll also note that additional information relating to item 13.6 was received after publishing the addendum agenda, and similarly, the correspondence from the New Hamburg Firebirds was also received after publishing the agenda package. Both pieces of correspondence will be included in the minutes to form part of the public record.
Through you, Acting Mayor Dunstall, we also have 3 additional items that were received later in the day today. So I'll just highlight, we've received correspondence from Christine and Lucy Gowron, from Kevin Thomason, and from Ron and Rosemary McCormick, all related to item 10 on the agenda. Those items will be put into the minutes and form part of the public record.
Thank you, Clerk Bunn. Adoption of the agenda. I will now read the recommendation that the agenda is presented for June 26, 2023 be adopted. May I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Martin. I will now call the vote. All in favor? The vote carries unanimously. Minutes of the previous meeting. I will now read the recommendation that the minutes of the following meetings be adopted as presented. June 12, 2023, regular council meeting. May I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Sadhu. I will now call the vote. All in favor? And the vote carries unanimously. Public meetings. This is a public meeting in respect to the Bamberg Creek, Janana, and Cook Lease Municipal Drain. The purpose of this meeting is to discuss the design of the drainage system. Any questions relating to assessment, cost sharing are not to be discussed tonight and will be discussed at a later date through the Court of Revision. I now declare the public meeting open. Persons attending as delegations at this meeting for any of these items are required to leave their names, which will become part of the public record, and you are hereby advised that this information may be posted on the Township's official website along with your email address if provided. I would like to remind all delegations for this evening of some guidelines for your participation. Applicants and agents of applicants have 10 minutes combined to speak. All other delegations will be given 7 minutes to speak. If part of your delegation have already been covered by previous delegations, we kindly ask that you provide only new material during your delegation. If you conduct yourself in any of the following manners, it will result in an immediate muting and removal from the meeting. Interrupting councillors, staff, or other delegates. Derogatory statements about councillors, staff, or others. Hate speech or defamatory comments. 9.1. Bamberg Creek, Janana, and Cookleys Municipal Drain, COR 2023-43. I will now read the recommendation. That the engineer's report dated April 28, 2023 for the Bamberg Creek, Janana, and Cookleys Municipal Drain for construction of a new closed municipal drain from 2 locations on the north part of Lot 10, Concession 3, block band extending downstream to its outlet into the Cook-Lease Drain and the Bamberg Creek be considered in accordance with Section 42 of the Drainage Act, and that the Bylaw 2023XX is attached to this agenda be given first and second readings to provisionally adopt the report if the petition remains valid after consideration of the report, and that the date of the Court of Revision be scheduled for August 16, 2023. If Bylaw 2023 as attached to this agenda is provisionally adopted with the following 2 members of council appointed. Councillors, anyone volunteering for this? Councillor Cressman and Councillor Wilkinson. May I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Sadhu. That passes. Oh, all in favor? Oh, we're not voting yet. Okay. Okay. Mr. Stephen Brickman, Headway Engineering, I now welcome you to introduce your report.
Thank you. I have a slide deck here, and I'll just wait for that to get onto the screen. Perfect. Thank you. So I'd like to thank the council here for this opportunity to present this report. This project has generated a lot of interest, so tonight I will focus on the extensive work that Headway Engineering has undertaken to produce this report. Could you advance the slide, please? Thank you. Firstly, we would like to mention that Headway Engineering was appointed under Section 4 of the Drainage Act, and that was on July 12th of 2021. Could you advance the slide, please? The project is located on the north side of Wilmot Township, with a portion of the watershed falling within the Wellesley Township. And next slide, please. Section 11 of the Drainage Act states the duties of the engineer appointed to investigate drainage works. According to this section, the engineer is expected to fulfill the following responsibilities. Number 1, exercise skill, knowledge, and judgment and ability. The engineer should utilize their expertise and capabilities to the best of their abilities in carrying out the duties related to the drainage works. This implies applying their professional skills and knowledge to the task at hand. Number 2, honesty and faithfulness. The engineer should act honestly and faithfully while performing their duties. This means conducting themselves with integrity, being truthful, and acting within the best interests of the project and the public. Impartiality. The engineer should not show favoritism or prejudice toward any individuals or group involved on a drainage works. They should remain unbiased and impartial in their decision making. And number 4, performance of assigned duties. The engineer is required to perform the duty assigned to them in accordance with the drainage works. In connection with the drainage works, I mean. This includes fulfilling their obligations, carrying out necessary assessments, investigations, and inspections, and ensuring that the drainage works comply with relevant regulation and standards. And the last point is to prepare a true report. So the engineer is responsible for preparing a true and accurate report of the drainage works. This involves providing an honest assessment of the project, including any findings, recommendations, or conclusions based on their observations and analysis. Could you advance, please? So focusing on the first section there, that is more geared toward the technical aspect of things. So if you could advance to the next slide, please. Thank you. Delving into the technical findings of our report, we've made several important observations, including number one, the Cook Lease drain has a very flat grade of approximately 300 meters at its outlet, contrary to the previous engineer's report indicating a steeper grade during its construction. Historical evidence suggests artificial improvements to Bamberg Creek, such as straightening and increasing depth, and increased depth when the Cook Lease drain was initially constructed in 1950. The western part of Lot 10, Concession 3, Block B, has been systematically tile drained toward the Cook Lease drain, while the northern side does not require systematic tiling due to special soil conditions. And by that, I'm talking about sand. The eastern portions of Lot 10, Concession 3, Block B have been tiled toward the Cook Lease drain, even though the natural drainage direction is south toward Bamberg Creek. However, the southeastern part of the property requires a legal outlet for drainage. Surface flow along the upper alignments of the East Branch and West Branch are negatively impacting the usability of surrounding lands. Future tiling is expected within the drainage area. The tile outlets into Bamberg Creek do not meet current standards for drainage depth. Beaver activity is a concern in Bamberg Creek, and the municipality currently has limited ability to perform maintenance. And current topographic data reveals inaccuracies in the Cook Lease drain watershed, as stated in the 1950 report. Could you advance to the next slide, please? Thank you. Based on these findings, our report recommends specific actions, which include the installation of approximately 1,358 meters of 8-inch to 18-inch diameter concrete field tile and HDP pipes, and also the improvement of approximately 1,201 meters of open channel. Could you advance to the next slide, please? Thank you. So this slide shows the estimated cost of the project at about $462,000, and the categories that are listed above show the breakdown of what is in that estimate. And the pie chart on the left shows a visual breakdown of how that actually is divvied up. And the next slide, please. Thank you. So now I'm going to shift the focus to public consultations. Could you advance one more? Thank you. And that we conducted as part of our duties under the Drainage Act. So Section 11 is particularly relevant to this topic of public consultations, as it emphasizes the engineer's responsibility to gather accurate information and report it faithfully. With this in mind, I would like to outline the series of consultations that Headway Engineering has undergone throughout the course of this project. To ensure a comprehensive and transparent process, Headway Engineering conducted multiple consultations, engaging with various stakeholders. Could you advance to the next slide? Thank you. And then this is a timeline of the consultations that have taken place. On September 22nd, 2021, the initial on-site meeting took place. Headway Engineering held an initial on-site meeting at the project site to assess the existing conditions and gather relevant information. On October 12th, a site inspection was conducted in collaboration with the GRCA to assess environmental factors for potential impacts. On December 3rd, notices were distributed to residents living along Bamberg Creek to inform them of upcoming survey. Landowners were invited to contact Headway Engineering. On March 31st of 2022, Headway Engineering submitted a project plans to the Department of Fisheries and Oceans for their review and feedback. On June 13th, a meeting was held with representatives of DFO to discuss the project and address any concerns or requirements. On June 27th, following that meeting with the DFO, their approval for the project was obtained. On September 29th, the first public information meeting took place, and Headway Engineering organized this public information meeting to present the project details and address concerns and gather feedback from the community. On November 1st, there was an inquiry raised from a landowner asking a question about how assessments were calculated, and Headway responded to that inquiry. On November 4th, lawyers representing certain stakeholders requested the meeting materials, which Headway then provided access to. On November 24th, a second public information meeting was held specifically for the Cook Lease drain, providing an opportunity for residents to engage and voice their concerns. On February 3rd, a meeting was arranged between Headway Engineering and the GRCA to discuss project details and address any environmental considerations. On February 9th, Headway Engineering engaged with a one-on-one meeting with a landowner to discuss the project. On February 10th, Headway reached out to the petitioner to explore the potential for a mutual agreement drain solution. On February 13th, following the previous one-on-one meeting, a contractor reached out to Headway with additional design details. On March 7th, the Ministry of Environment, so the MECP, the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, was engaged by Headway Engineering to assess concerns related to the Endangered Species Act and to seek approval for the project. On March 23rd, the MECP granted that approval. On March 30th, Headway Engineering received a complaint from a landowner, and on March 31st, we promptly provided that complaint to the township. On March 31st as well, Headway Engineering initiated a conversation with Green WR, an environmental advocacy group, to discuss the project and the mandate of Green WR. And on April 3rd, a councillor reached out to township staff to inquire about the project, leading to a request for Headway Engineering to provide additional project information. On April 19th, Headway Engineering and some council members and staff convened to discuss the project, and on April 26th, councillors posed further questions regarding the public engagement process, seeking clarity and information. On May 2nd, Headway provided responses to council's requests and supplied comprehensive information regarding the public engagement process. In and around this time, the report was filed as well. On June 5th, a landowner contacted Headway Engineering with inquiries about the report, contents, and information regarding meetings. And on June 12th, in an effort to address landowner concerns, Headway engaged proactively and engaged with another landowner to discuss contents of the report and provide clarification. These consultations demonstrate our commitment to transparency, accountability, and addressing the concerns of the public and stakeholders. We have made extensive efforts to engage with various individuals and organizations throughout this project timeline. Could you advance to the next slide, please? This is a copy of the on-site meeting which was circulated on for the information meeting, I should say, that was held on September 22nd. Could you advance to the next slide, please? And then, this is hard to read, but these are the details of what was discussed at the on-site meeting. The meeting began with a discussion on the purpose of the project, emphasizing the need to address concerns such as blowouts, lack of depth, excessive runoff, and unending repairs and other related issues. Landowners were also encouraged to provide copies of tile maps and share any knowledge that they had regarding watershed issues. During the meeting, several landowners expressed their comments and concerns, and some of those related to surface water issues. So some landowners highlighted the need for drain to control surface water as it was causing problems on their property. One landowner mentioned that their farm had undergone drainage work recently. It was noted that the previous attempts to reach an agreement regarding a private drain or a mutual agreement drain had not made significant progress. Concerns about Bamberg Creek outlet depth was raised. Some landowners expressed concerns about the depth there. Questions about the timeline. So landowners inquired about project timeline, but Headway could not provide specific timeline due to many possible factors. Sandy lands near Gerber Road and to the north was mentioned, and assessment concerns and how assessments are actually calculated was asked as well. Landowners opting, it was acknowledged too that some landowners expressed their desire to not be involved in the project. So additionally, there were inquiries about the condition of road pipes, and Headway Engineering addressed those concerns by providing photos for reference. As for the next steps, discussing the meeting, it was noted that specific timelines were unpredictable and that, at that early stage in the project. However, the project would progress further, taking into account the information shared by landowners. Continuing with the presentation, so if we could move on to the next slide, please. This is just a copy of the survey notice which was circulated and hand-delivered. And then the next slide, please. This is a copy of the first public information meeting notice for September 13th. And could you advance to the next slide, please? Thank you. Some of the notes on this. So there was some design-related comments. Beavers in Bamberg Creek, so Headway addressed concerns about dealing with beavers through maintenance. Stony and bedrock stream bed in Bamberg Creek, so Headway Engineering acknowledged the comments and assured the attendees that the drain would be reviewed and revised as needed to account for the conditions in the area. As a result, the design was adjusted to reduce the work in Bamberg Creek. And then better grade for Cookleys. So feedback was received the day after the meeting, prompting Headway Engineering to revise the design, ensuring improved grading at the lower end of the Cookleys drain. There were some other questions and comments noted as well. So one of the questions that came up was, what is the purpose of the project? So attendees sought clarification on the project's purpose, to which Headway Engineering responded that it is aimed to provide a legal outlet at 2 locations affected by the surface flows from neighboring properties. There was a query raised about the business case, prompting Headway Engineering to explain the process of requesting a cost-benefit analysis. There was a significant dispute between landowners which occurred during that meeting regarding receiving surface flows. There was assessment questions. So attendees expressed curiosity about how assessments were calculated, and Headway Engineering provided a detailed explanation of the assessment calculation process and the instruments which would be used. And then the timeline as well. So while acknowledging, again, it's difficult to predict the timelines, we estimated that a best case scenario for construction would be in 2024. And in addition to that, there was about a 45-minute one-on-one session held after the public meeting with the landowner, and it reiterated on some of the following, or in some of the above points. One of them being the purpose of the project, and Headway Engineering reiterated that the purpose of the project was aimed to provide a legal outlet to 2 locations affected by surface flows from neighboring properties. There was questions about assessment calculations and how that was done, and the relevance to the petitioner. So Headway Engineering confirmed that the petitioners were receiving surface flows involuntarily and required an outlet for lands that couldn't be drained to the Cook-Lees drain. Could you advance the next slide, please? Thank you. So this is the second public information meeting, the notice that was shared. And the next slide, please. And the comments that we received during that. So we completed some design revisions from the previous meeting to accommodate or to account for the stony bedrock stream bed. Adjustments were made to the grades of Bamber Creek to reduce the extent of work in that area, and better grade for the Cook-Lees was added as well. There were comments and questions again. So a question about the expansion of the project. Attendees inquired about the reasons for expanding the project, and Headway Engineering explained that the reason was because a request was made for an improved grade at the lower end of the Cook-Lees drain, as this current grade was flat with a poor outlet requiring frequent maintenance. Additional requirements, and then Headway Engineering also, this is Headway Engineering asking for information. Headway also inquired if there was any other requirements for the Cook-Lees drain, but the landowners and Wellesley Township Drainage Superintendent did not request further investigation. Questions about the purpose of the project, and attendees sought clarification on why the project was happening. Engineer reiterated that it is aimed to provide a legal outlet for the 2 locations affected by surface flows from the neighboring properties. And again, a question about timeline. Could you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So there was a one-on-one meeting held on February 9th, and during this we held discussions on the following broad topics. Who wants the drain and who doesn't? So Headway Engineering acknowledged that the drain was unpopular and discussed the sentiments expressed by different parties involved. Area acquiring drainage versus benefiting area versus liable area was a talking point too. And Headway Engineering explained the distinctions between these 3 areas, clarifying the scope and responsibilities associated with each. Proposed plan for the tile drainage. The landowner provided Headway Engineering with proposed tile drainage plans for review. There was work concerns. The landowner inquired whether Headway Engineering was intentionally creating unnecessary work. Headway Engineering responded that efforts were made to minimize the amount of work that wherever possible. Payback periods was discussed, and roles under the Drainage Act. So Headway Engineering discussed the obligations of the engineer under the Drainage Act, and appeal process and information provided at the public meeting. Headway Engineering informed the landowner that appeals were not budgeted in the estimates provided. Following this meeting, several actions were addressed, including contacting the petitioner for a mutual agreement, reaching out to the contractor for design information regarding a tiling system, and forwarding a complaint regarding the duties under the Drainage Act to the township. Can we go to the next slide, please? The next few slides are on the benefits. So one common question that has come up a lot was, what are the benefits and why are we doing this? And to kind of go through some of these different benefits. So the first slide here demonstrates the control of surface flows entering a property that currently has no obligation to receive surface flow. By providing legal outlets, we can ensure that the affected properties are no longer burdened with illegitimate surface flows, which will enhance then their overall functionality. The next slide, please. This slide displays the area where new legal outlets will be established. It will also improve the depth and enhance the usability of the affected lands, and it is essential to address these issues to prevent their accumulation of excess runoff and creating a more sustainable and manageable operation. Next slide, please. This slide highlights the areas where improved workability can be expected through the enabling of tile drainage and better functioning of tile drainage. And the next slide, please. Higher market value. So moving on to this one, so we can observe that properties that would experience an increase in market value as a result of this project. So by addressing drainage concerns and improving the overall functionality of the land, property values are likely to rise. And the next slide, please. The next slide highlights this watershed area, which will be experiencing reduced maintenance frequency. The effective drainage solutions in place, with effective drainage solutions in place, the need for frequent maintenance and repairs will diminish. This not only saves resources, but also ensures the longevity and sustainability of the drainage system. And the next slide, please. Yeah, this is consideration for lands severed. So it is important to recognize that impacts on these lands and the impact to these lands and address any concerns associated with the project. By carefully assessing and accounting for the effects of severed lands, we aim to find a balanced and equitable solution for the parties involved. So by implementing this drainage project, we are working toward improving an overall quality of the lands for the landowners, enhance the functionality of the affected lands, and fostering a sustainable and resilient system. Can you go to the next slide, please? Going back to the timeline, and this is a discussion with Green WR. During a call, we had a broad discussion on green infrastructure and rural drainage. We explored various environmentally friendly practices such as low carbon concrete, tree planting, and berming. Headway shared examples of projects that have successfully incorporated these features, highlighting their benefits and positive impacts. Furthermore, Green WR emphasized the importance of engaging with planners and the township staff to promote rural green development. We discussed ways to implement low-carbon materials and to explore opportunities for incorporating environmental features like buffer strips. In response to a landowner's inquiry, Headway assured Green WR that Bamberg Creek will continue to be buffered. We also stressed the significance of carefully selecting project sites to maximize the effectiveness of environmental features. And the next slide, please. This is a meeting and some notes regarding the meeting with township staff and some council members. So on April 19th, Headway engineering staff and a couple council members gathered to discuss the project. And during that meeting, Headway reviewed the presentation notes from the public engagements. We delved into the Drainage Act process, particularly focusing on the requirements for a bylaw, and we explained the importance of a provisional bylaw, which ensures that the report survives the appeal process. Only after dealing with any appeal can the third and final reading of a bylaw be conducted. We also discussed the unique ability that only the council has the authority to make a bylaw. Additionally, we emphasized the significance of education and information throughout the project. We stressed the importance of upholding the rights of everyone involved and ensuring that accurate and comprehensive information is provided. We discussed the role of public engagement and shared details about who was invited and to participate and who actively did participate. Next slide, please. So on May 2nd, there was a request for comments from councillors. So councillors sought more information regarding the project, and staff forwarded their questions to Headway. We provided comprehensive responses addressing various aspects of the project. We discussed the details of our public engagement efforts, including who was invited to participate, who actively did engage with us, and furthermore, we provided an overview of the Drainage Act process, ensuring that everyone involved understands its significance. Throughout our responses, we emphasized the importance of education and the commitment to upholding the rights of all stakeholders. We stress the value of providing accurate information to ensure transparency and fairness throughout this project. If you go to the next slide, please. Thank you. This slide highlights the dashed yellow line around the perimeter is everyone who has been invited to participate. The yellow shaded area is people that have actively participated with the engineer. And on the bulleted list on the side, there's a list of other people, other agencies, I should say, that have engaged with us as well. Next slide, please. Thank you. This slide shows what's required under the Drainage Act. So the requirements under the Drainage Act are an on-site meeting, the meeting to consider, which is tonight, and a quarter revision. That's the requirement under the Drainage Act. And I should also point out too that the on-site meeting under the Drainage Act is only required to be held with the petitioner. Common practice is to include more people. It's also to have an additional public information meeting. There's always follow-ups. And then to hold this consideration, and always there will be a quarter revision as well. And then there's this project. We held our on-site meeting, we held a public information meeting, we held a second information meeting, we had a couple one-on-one meetings. Our follow-ups were extensive. We met with environmental programs and counselor follow-ups as well. And so that's the effort that we put into this project. Could you advance the slide, please? Thank you. This is how input received from the stakeholders has influenced the content of the report. So the red circled highlights how comments regarding frequency of maintenance at the lower end of the Cook Lease drain have been addressed through improved grading. And the yellow circled area demonstrates how public input has led to a reduction in the scope of work in Bamberg Creek. And this exemplifies the direct impact of stakeholder input and shaping the final report. If you can go to the next slide, please. Looking at Bamberg Creek in more detail. So this is what we have on the screen here is a profile of Bamberg Creek as it was presented at the public information meeting number 1. Could you just advance it by a keystroke? And now it's going to transition into what's actually in the report. So the amount of reduction, a couple hundred meters less of cleanout, and the flattening of the grade with reduced depth as well. And the next slide, please. This shows a similar information on Bamberg Creek as it relates to cross sections instead. So these cross sections were presented at the public information meeting number 1. And if you could advance, it's going to transition into a smaller cross section basically as to what's actually in the report now. Could you advance one more slide, please? Thank you. So to reiterate, the duty of the engineer is to perform the assigned duty honestly, faithfully, and without favoritism or prejudice. We have fulfilled this duty by conducting a thorough investigation, considering all relevant factors, and producing a true and comprehensive report. We have presented this information to inform the council about the extensive work that has been put into this project and the rationale behind our conclusions. We acknowledge that the project is unpopular. As engineers appointed to investigate this matter, we have a responsibility to uphold the rights of everyone, petitioner and every other landowner as well. This report does precisely that. So thank you for your attention and consideration, and if there's any questions, I'd be happy to
Thank you,
try to
Mr.
field those.
Brickman. Does council have any questions of a technical nature for Mr. Brickman? Sorry, Councillor Wilkinson?
Yes, through you, Chair. Just curious, there was mention of I guess an approach initially of a mutual agreement drain prior to a petition being filed. Can you elaborate on any of those details or just sort of explain what might have transpired?
Prior to the petition being filed? Oh, that would be before Headway's involvement. So I don't know those details.
Councillor Martin?
Thank you, Mr. Brickman, for your report. Through you, what's your term? Designated Mayor Dunstall.
Certainly is.
So I do have a couple of questions, and I'm trying to formulate them, and I appreciate your comments because it's true. From what I understand, there are people who are not in favor of this project. But following up on Councillor Wilkinson's question, I thought that earlier in your discussion, in your presentation to us, you said that there was a meeting where you discussed options.
Yep.
Could you elaborate on that?
Yes, I can elaborate on that. So that was after the petition was filed, and that was held in February. It wasn't a meeting, it was a phone call, but it was held in, I think it was February 10th on the timeline. We did reach out to the petitioner before we filed the report to see whether there was a chance of mutual agreement. There is no chance.
Thank you, and through you, designated mayor, is there a different term, or what, chair? What, through you, Chair Dunstall, that's a better way of saying it. Thank you. So I'm just trying to understand, could you elaborate any further why you think there would be people opposed? It seems as a number of people have reached out, and it seems like the landowners around this area are not in favor. And so I'm just trying to understand if you have any more comments that you can add to it, reflecting on you know, as you say, you did a very extensive job. You had many more meetings than are required under the Act, and so it seems your work seems very extensive. So obviously you believe that there's a need for this drain and for this work and for dealing with the creeks. At the same time, we have people saying it's going to be harmful to the environment, it affects the wildlife, it's affecting the creeks, it's more work than is needed. I don't know if there's more you can say about it. I realize you have a very extensive report. I'm just trying to put all of this together in terms of...
Yeah, sure. So through the chair, so some of the items that you just listed, I think are reasons. I mean, I think another one is that people who are not receiving benefit are paying into the system. They're being involved on a project that that they have to contribute to and don't really receive anything for it. So that's another common one too. But like you mentioned, there may be environmental concerns. Don't change something in the creek. What we have to do as engineers. So when a petition is filed with the township and an engineer is appointed on the job, we have to assess whether there is an area requiring drainage, of course. In this case, there is. The petition is valid in representing that area requiring drainage. And then from there, we are obligated to come up with a solution to solve that area requiring drainage. So we have to come up with that solution. We present that solution, and we present what it costs. We present how the costs are to be shared in accordance with the Drainage Act and the tools that are available to us in the Drainage Act. And the lower limit of that system needs to be the sufficient outlet. So the upper limit being the area requiring drainage, the lower limit being the sufficient outlet, and in between is a municipal drain. And of course, there are benefiting areas. Like, you don't just have one benefiting area, which is the area requiring drainage. You have other benefiting areas that, of course, spill off because of the construction of a new municipal drainage project. So that's what we're obligated to do under the Act. If there is a valid petition, we are obligated to continue on with that for as long as it is valid. And that's what this report has done.
Thank you.
Any more questions, councillors? No, seeing none. Thank you, Mr. Rickman, for your report. I now call our first delegation for this matter, Christine Gowran and Lucy Gowran of Janana Corporation. Christine and Lucy, you have 10 minutes combined for your presentation, and I hope I did your surname justice.
Good evening, Mayor Dunstall and councillors. This evening we wish to first thank Council for allowing us this opportunity to present our petition concerning our farmland drainage problems, and as also outlined in the Bamber Creek, Janana and Cook Lease Municipal Drains Report proposed by Headway Engineering. We, the family members, I, Lucy Garan, and Christine Garan, as well as Walter Krupnick and Irene Schneider, Teresa Garan of our Janana Farm Corporation located 1184 Gerber Road, R1 Wellesley, Lot 10, Concession 3B, 4 miles east of Wellesley. Our reasons for asking Council to accept our petition is because we continue to experience spring and heavy rainfall flooding issues, and also surface water erosion on our land. We believe that the professional engineers at Headway Engineering have designed an accurate and legal drainage plan that will help to resolve these problems, that encompasses our farm, as well as affects some of the neighbors' properties and the surrounding watershed areas. Our major concern is a need for outlet tiles for the water from our family farm to flow naturally to the existing watershed creek, that being the Bamber Creek and currently non-municipal drain in Cook Lease Municipal Creek. At present, our farm receives runoff water from neighboring locations in Wellesley Township along the west side and down the middle of our property and on the east side. The runoff water significantly includes overflow from the neighboring Kittle property. We understand that we're not obligated to accept this runoff water and could potentially, as well as legally, attempt to create a berm. Instead, we are looking to Council by means of implementing the Drainage Act to improve the proposed Bamber Creek, Janana and Cook's Lease Municipal Drain 2023 plan. Additionally, we feel that the professional drainage project plan submitted by the Headways engineer provides for legally responsible solutions to help resolve not only the current drainage issues we are still experiencing, but also implement a strategy for maintaining and addressing possible future drainage concerns that may arise on our and our neighboring properties, as well as within our localized watershed community. Chris?
Okay. Good evening, Mayor Dunstall, councillors, and to the public members attending this meeting. As Lucy mentioned, I'm Christine Garn, and I also wish to express my thank you again for this opportunity to speak and address this letter to the council and all those attending this evening's council meeting. Our property, as many of our neighbors may know, and who have similar properties surrounding ours. Okay, our property has been an active farm for approximately 100 years, 100 and likely more years. Just to share a little background farming history that's based on the historical records we have. Our family farm was owned by Joseph F. Lichty and a family prior to the 23rd of February 1937, when Lichty sold it to Elmer Gerber. Elmer Gerber then farmed for another 31 years, including the period over World War II, when he imprinted the sidewalk entryway to our farmhouse with his name and the date May 21st, 1945, and which to this day is still there. Our father and mother, Jan and Anna Garn, purchased the farm property from Gerber on March 25th, 1957, and set about to improve the farmland, which they were able to do in the mid-1960s in cooperation with our adjoining neighbors to have random clay tiles put in to help drain the lower portion of the farm, which is a heavier clay soil. After retiring from their lifelong dairy operation, our parents then leased the land to other farmers who cash cropped, though they continued to do their best to keep the fields upgraded until our dad passed in 2007 and our mom in 2012. Unfortunately, over time with the operation of heavy equipment and during periods of damper weather, the old clay tiles progressively deteriorated. In 2012, we asked Wilmot Township to investigate the poor, by way of Superintendent John Kunze. We asked the township to investigate the poor drainage flow in the Cochlice Municipal Drain. And then in June and July of 2018, we contracted Kipfer Farm Drainage to remedy our increasing wet fields and install systematic tiles throughout the lower clay belt portion of our land. At that point, we needed to have better drainage flow in the Cochlice Creek, which Wilmot Township had again dredged out, but we also needed to have better access to the Bamber Creek, in which direction the water from the east side of our property naturally flows. So in an effort to try to work together on a systematic solution, we approached our eastern border neighbor prior to commencing the installation of our systematic tiles, but his response was negative and unwilling to contribute anything toward forming a new tile outlet to the Bamber Creek at that time. We anyway proceeded with the work and did what we could on our own property. For the greater part of our farm that drains into the Cochlice Creek, the systematic tiling proved to be effective, but not for the water entering from the eastern neighbor's property and settling on a portion of the field on the south side of, on the southeast side land where once the water flowed to Bamber Creek. I'd just like to share another interesting and relatable note with everyone again. A recent article in the CBC News that was posted May 30th of this year highlights the concern for the loss of farmland in Ontario, which by many accounts is the best in Canada. Pressure on policy changes dealing with severance, the partitioning of farmlands, and to allow for more urbanization has potential negative outcomes. One being the loss of farmland, two, the potential conflict between residential property owners and farm operators. There was a quote, "That's an awful lot of people moving into the countryside and having to deal with the issues of farming that they're not used to." In a conclusion, we're asking Wilmot Township Council, by way of our petition, to help restore these lands to the ongoing workable condition that they were in the past, and which we will hope maintain a viable farm for many years. Thank you for your consideration.
I'll close actually, Mayor Dunstall. Our hope is that through the Drainage Act process, Wilmot Township Council will approve the engineer's Bamber Creek, Janana and Cooksley's Municipal Drain 2003 plan. We believe that the drainage plan facilitates the fair evaluation of the responsibility in terms of cost allocated to each of our fellow stakeholder landowners, who we feel will derive a benefit from the creation and the township future ongoing maintenance of this improved municipal drain system. We are optimistic that Wilmot Township Council may appreciate the sense of value. And I'll repeat that. We are optimistic that Wilmot Township Council will and may appreciate the sense of value we have in maintaining arable farmland, and will help us to restore our land to the ongoing condition that it was in the past when operating as a valuable farm for over 50 years under the stewardship of our parents, Jan and Anna, who were the inspiration for our Jan Anna Corporation name that we hold. Once again, thank you, Mayor Dunstall, councillors, and all the attendees at tonight's meeting.
Thank you. Council, do you have any questions for Christine and Lucy? Seeing none, thank you, ladies, for your presentation. Our next delegation for this matter is Ted Derry. Mr. Derry, you have 7 minutes. Your time will begin once you start speaking.
Mayor and councillors, my name is Ted Derry. I've been a Wilmot resident for 43 years. I'm here to represent the Avon Trail Association. Perhaps some of you don't know, the Avon Trail is a 120 some odd kilometer foot trail that goes between St. Mary's and Conestoga. 28 kilometers of that goes through Wilmot Township, very close to this subject area here. And in 2020, in order to gain off-road access, we approached landowners that were concerned and built a bridge over the Bamberg Creek in the middle of this area that's under discussion. We had the approval and encouragement of the landowners so that they could cross the creek and have access to both sides of their property, and the general public could avoid 2.5 kilometers of road walking, which is dangerous and much more scenic to go off-road through fields and forests. So in 2020, we built the bridge. We needed to get a permit from the Grand River Conservation Authority as to the site and all our methodology. And on that note, I was very surprised to see GRCA listed as signing off or not objecting to this drainage proposal, because they were very rigorous in stipulating what we could and couldn't do to build the bridge. Barely touch a stone. We had to walk all our materials in, no heavy equipment other than what we absolutely needed to dig post holes, and it could only be done at a certain time of the year because of respecting wildlife in the stream. And we followed all that. And now to hear the opposite approach to that, with equipment being driven in, backhoes and who what knows what, and cutting down trees and bushes to get at the creek, seems kind of ironic to me that we followed all these rules from the GRCA and now they don't seem to have an objection to this project. Notwithstanding all that, I appreciate the need for drainage, and I don't know, I certainly don't have the authority to call a stop to this, but my personal, as a member of the Avon Trail Association, my personal concern is for the integrity of the trail that we have built in that area, which serves the public and members of Wilmot Township and the landowners and the bridge. And I don't know if I can ask that some sort of guarantee be put in place that the bridge will not be threatened from an engineering point of view by the dredging operation. And I would hope that common sense would prevail here. We were bombarded with a lot of facts and figures from the engineering report, which I appreciated, but sometimes it's easy to forget the core essence of the project and what the impact will be on all the other landowners who don't want to support this, whether or not they may accrue benefits down the road. And I would just like to close by quoting Joni Mitchell, who's saying many years ago, you pay paradise and you put up a parking lot. It's not quite a parallel, but sometimes you don't know what you got till it's gone. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Derry. Council, do you have any questions for Mr. Derry? No. Thank you, Mr. Derry. I'd like to take this opportunity to remind everyone that this meeting is to address the design of the drainage system and that there will be a Court of Appeals on August 16th, or Court of Revision, sorry, on August 16th. Our next delegation is Corey Kittle. Corey, you have 7 minutes.
Yeah, if you could bring up those slides here. Okay, sorry. Hi, everybody. My name is Corey. I've met most of you, but thank you for having me. Just a couple things I want to address real quick, just regarding the engineer's presentation. That initial on-site meeting, nowhere have I ever read that only the petitioners are supposed to be invited to that. That's, to me, is a very critical meeting required by the Drainage Act. That really is the genesis of the plan that's put forward. And he kept referring to landowners. From my understanding, an invitation was set out to 3 people. There was one landowner, non-petitioner landowner, that attended that meeting. So I'm not too sure what landowners he would be referring to, but I know for a fact there was only one non-petitioner landowner at that meeting. And if you missed that meeting, that was pretty much it. The plan was set and off it went. Any discussion about other engagement kind of came too late. You know, that would have been an email, a complaint, some type of issue regarding the plan. So I really wouldn't call that public engagement. The other thing about the report I just want to highlight too, there's no mention of petition validity. It's very light in that regard. There's no mention of area requiring drainage. It's very light in that regard. There's very little evidence provided with regard to any of that. So there's lots I could talk about today. I specifically want to focus on a few key things. I could talk about the non-existent public engagement process that 94% of the impacted landowners were not allowed to be part of. I could definitely talk about the lack of options and the gross expenditures, 3 times that of any comparables that I've seen or we received. Yeah, listen, there's lots to talk about. Really, I do want to just skip ahead because I do want to talk about petition validity. And I'm going to be referring to this document a lot. This is the Guide for Engineers created by OMAFRA. It pretty much sets the stage, the standard, the expectation of what engineers are required to do as part of the Drainage Act. There's one point here in the guide that says, the validity of the petition is the most significant determination that an engineer makes for a drainage works initiated by a petition. Okay, that's a very strong, bold statement. If you could skip ahead here, actually. And sorry, just in case you haven't seen it, this is the infrastructure we're talking about already in place. So the discussion we're having today is making a pretty significant investment into an already very sophisticated drainage system. The areas we're talking about are fairly minute and small that actually don't have drainage at the moment. So if you skip to the next part. Okay, so this is what we're going to focus on in my discussion. So, just bear with me here. So I'm going to talk about how the project is based on an invalid petition and the unauthorized additions of drainworks absent from any petition and without the legally required public meetings. So if you could, so this is pulled right from the Drainage Act. This basically says this. It says that the majority of the landowners in the area requiring drainage have to be on the petition to be valid. That is pretty much what this is saying right from the Drainage Act. Since Janana are the only ones on the petition, the engineer is saying that the area requiring drainage falls exclusively on the Janana property. So if he's making that determination, that's basically what he's saying. Here's the problem with that. If you could go to the next slide. So the area requiring drainage does not fall exclusively on the Janana property. That's the part the engineer got wrong, in the area requiring drainage. He wrongfully assumed that the water stops at the petitioner's fence line, and therefore the area requiring drainage magically stops at the fence line, but it does not. Clearly here you can see in this visual, and there's lots of historical satellite data. I'm going to show you another slide here that shows the two properties and how the drainage area does impact both properties. We're going to get into why that's important in a second here. So he picked out only a portion of what is in fact a larger distinct basin requiring drainage to satisfy the request of the petitioner. You can't do that. It creates a false majority. The lands in the area requiring drainage include two properties, the Janana property and the Kittle property. Therefore, both Janana and Kittle need to be on that petition for it to be valid. Kittle is not on the petition, was never asked to be on the petition, and was never properly notified even about the required on-site meeting. If you go to the next slide. So this is a GRCA map. You can see it's got hydrology data. There's actually some selections regarding drainage. You can see kind of in that left menu. This isn't decided willy-nilly. This is engineers come out, they look at the lands. You can see sort of the perimeter that they've mapped out, and this is coming right from the GRCA. Next slide. So again, you can see this constantly. This is from the petition itself. You can see the area requiring drainage does fall across the two properties. This is right from the petition photo that was submitted. Next slide. So you can actually see that, there appears to be very little issue growing crops on the Janana side, and their actual area concern is less than an acre, where you can argue the crops are growing pretty significantly here. You can see in these photos, there's no question where the drainage area is. If you could go to the next slide. So I'm really focusing on this petition validity, area requiring drainage. Next slide. Again, I'll get into that in a second why I'm doing that. So on the northern part of the fence line, there's also some drainage planned here as well. You can see it's the same issue. We have two properties involved in this. All the catch basins you can see in the plan fall along or near the property line, which clearly indicates the area requiring drainage is on both properties. A newly installed drain actually does exist in this location, and there's been no mention of that in the report. And I'm not even sure the engineer was aware of that during the site visit.
Excuse me, Mr. Kittle, we're running short on time, so you have 1 minute. Would you be able to make your closing statement, please?
Yeah, my closing statement is this. If you go to the next slide, these are all examples of these areas requiring drainage, apparently. Go to the next slide. So really it boils down to this. And this is coming from case law. This is coming from the Guide for Engineers. It's coming from OMAFRA. For the petition to be valid, according to Section 41A, even 4.1b, both petitioners have to be on that, both landowners have to be on that petition. That's a requirement by law. That's a requirement by the Drainage Act. I provided you all lots of examples of case law that back that claim up. And again, this is all coming from the guide. And if you go to the next slide and you go to the next slide, so this is all the case law I've provided you that supports that. You can go to the next slide. OMAFRA and the guide spells this out very simply, very clearly. If you walk through these examples, they speak specifically to our situation here today. They walk you through petition validity. I actually have the guides here today if you want to read through them, but I've really boiled it down for you here. That is a very hard requirement. My final words are the Drainage Act is supposed to be a democratic process. It has these built-in checks and balances to ensure those who are opposed to certain works have the opportunity to do so. This was overlooked here, and the lands described in the report by the engineer did not accurately describe the area requiring drainage. His failure to do so would not afford the intended protection for those who did not sign the petition. This is a statement pulled directly from case law, from the official OMAFRA guide for engineers, so we could safely say the engineer was provided this information. I think today Council has the obligation here to not only do what's right, but it was also dictated by the law and by the Drainage Act.
Thank you, Mr. Kittle. Council, do you have any questions for Mr. Kittle? Seeing none, thank you for your time. Our next delegation on this matter is Peter Whirl. You have 7 minutes for your delegation, and your time starts when you begin speaking.
Councillors, thank you very much for the opportunity to make a short presentation tonight. For many years now, my wife and I signed a declaration with the Conservation Land Tax Incentive folks, which is a department of the Ontario Ministry of Northern Development, Mines, Natural Resources and Forestry. In that declaration, we promise not to undertake any activities that degrade, destroy, or result in the loss of the natural heritage features. We're also to allow representatives from that department to enter the property to confirm that the land is being maintained as conservation land. Even though I am still asked to participate in this program, as a matter of fact, I just asked to be part of the program a few days ago, it seems that I am supposed to ignore my responsibilities that they ask me to do. This provincially significant wetland is now at risk if this project goes forward. There are many reasons for the project that we're discussing today to be rejected, reasons that other folks are speaking about tonight and that have been sent into council in written form, but I only want to add to the discussion by pointing out that there are alternatives to the action that should be considered. Until now, only the petitioner, engineers, and one or two of the affected landowners have been involved in formal discussions. For the majority of the Wilmot citizens, this proposed project comes as a shocking surprise. Citizens have not been given the opportunity to participate. They've just been shown something which is presented as a final solution. My property has the creek running right through it, and it's the area that is going to be dug out. I was given one letter at one point a couple of years ago, and I was out of the country at the time, so I couldn't participate in whatever that was. And I haven't received one notification about anything since, at all. Further ideas and alternatives can come to light with a proper gathering of interested citizens. Are there alternatives? Here are just 3. 1, the most obvious and sensible alternative is to leave the area to nature as it is. Why do we feel as human beings that we always have to try to bend the system, to squeeze the last drop of perceived benefit from any opportunity? 2, we could explore the idea of ponding, which could act as a shock absorber during the spring runoff, which is really the only time that extra water is around of any subsequence. 3, there's also the possibility to completely eliminate the proposed east branch and have any necessary additional drainage go to the existing Cocklease drain. This would eliminate the need to dredge the Bamberg Creek at all, since the levels of the creek at the point where the Cocklease drain exit is at a level which is adequate for good drainage for all the surrounding arable land. Only the exit of the proposed east branch requires a deeper level to drain properly. The drainage is happening every year now, and sure, in the spring runoff, things go up a little bit, and then with 4 or 5 days, they start to go down. By the time the farmers are ready to plant, everything is good. The farmer who's working the majority of the lower level land here sees no need for improved drainage. He keeps planting every year with no problem. There is every reason to stop this overly ambitious project now, today, or as a minimum, to take the time to look at the alternatives that could come up with proper counsel and weigh them carefully, democratically. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wordle. Council, any questions? Thank you.
Okay.
Our next delegation on this matter is Elena and Oleg Borisov. You have 7 minutes for your delegation, and your time begins once you begin speaking.
Hi, we are the owners of the farm where the proposed work for Bamberg Creek Municipal Drain is going, and I want to address the insufficient public engagement. The first communication we received was in the fall of 2022 about the council meeting. Township authorized engineer to start the report more than a year earlier, July 12, 2021. Right away, I contacted Tim Brook, the Omafra drainage coordinator, and he recommended me several documents. Here is the quote from one of them: the guideline to the engineers acting under the Drainage Act regarding on-site meeting. Quote, each owner should be interviewed, and if any are not present but are deemed to be affected because of work being done on their land or because of other anticipated concerns, the engineer should attempt to contact them. At the on-site meeting, the engineer should ensure that petitioners and/or any owners on whose land the drainage works will be constructed are aware of the locations where construction may occur and that there may be substantial assessments involved. We were never invited to the on-site meeting or contacted otherwise until that a year or more later, the notice that there will be a council meeting. Corey already addressed the validity of petition, and it is obvious that from the GRCA wetland classification, topographic maps, drainage plans, that the line where the drainage work should be done doesn't stop at the Janana Corporation property. There were several opportunities prior to the preliminary report to assess validity of petition. And if it was missed for any reasons before, it should have been properly assessed when the preliminary report was done, because this is a way how it is explained in the guideline to the engineers acting under the Drainage Act. The next thing that I want to look is the benefit cost analysis presented in the engineer's report. I want to look only at the Bumber Creek drain as an example. The total assessment of benefits of Bumber Creek drain is $86,000. But the cost for the Drainage Act allowances plus construction cost for Bumber Creek drain is $90,000 plus $44,000. So the estimated cost of the Bumber Creek drain is $50,000 more than any benefit from it. All owners listed in the engineer's report that potentially have the benefit, they signed the petition against this work being done. So they do not see any benefit getting from this work. So this will only leave Janana Corporation that they are listed in the report to receive benefit of $10,000 for this work, and the cost of this work is $135,000. Again, I'm going back to the guide to the engineers regarding the benefit cost statement. Quote from this document: the engineer should determine the present land use practices, should estimate the values of yield from such practices, should estimate possible and likely future land use practices, and the corresponding yields, should consider increased production cost, additional land improvement costs, costs of the project, should assess other benefits and the outlets, should compute net annual cost and benefits, and should appraise the total benefits versus the total cost. So if I try to do this, according to the engineer's report, Janana Corporation will have 10,000 benefits from doing Bumber Creek drainage project. Let's see, Janana Corp is renting out their land area. Area requiring drainage is 1 acre. Average land rent is $300 per acre per year. It will take 33 years to see these 10,000 in benefits. But they already have the crop growing, so it's not that they will have the drain and only after that they will receive this benefit. So it will be only improved yields, and obviously it will take longer to get the benefit of 10,000. Then, if you can talk about our
Yeah, I
land.
can add maybe about the benefits for our property. It is also listed that we'll have half of the property benefiting from this additional drainage, which is 21 acres. So this is an area which we live there for 10 years. What we see there is only less water. And I don't see how getting rid of additional water will benefit us if for the whole year this whole land stays dry. So we're trying to conserve the water as much as we can. Instead of doing, for example, 3 cuts, we do only 2 or 1, simply for that reason, because we see when we do it and we have dry periods during the summer, it sits bone dry for the most of the year. And I don't see how our property can benefit, how it can raise in value. Maintenance costs also cannot be cited here. So absolutely, how it is possible to have that value of $5,000 in benefits for our property. It's just impossible.
Sorry, we're coming to the 7 minutes.
Yeah.
Can you just give your closing statement? Thank you.
So I just want to shortly talk about dam that was built by a beaver, and at that time the area was assessed by the engineer, and we all understand if the beaver builds the dam, then the flow of the creek is not going anywhere. And the solution is, like, if we try to fix this issue by cutting out, like getting the creek deeper, it's not going to fix it, because an average beaver builds 5 meters high dam, and it will not notice the 3 feet that is proposed by the engineer. So during the last 50 years, according to Wurtels, There were several occasions when the beaver built the dam, and it was solved by just GRCA coming in. They have an agreement with them, and it was fixed. Or some, like another farmer, thank you, Ken, for doing this time, did this, and the issue went away. And right now the creek is 6 inches high. So there is no problem. And as a thank you, like I want to thank all the councilors for working with us, for coming to the properties. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, council? Thank you. I will reiterate that the purpose of tonight's meeting is to discuss the design of the drainage system. Are there any persons in the audience who wish to address council on this matter? Please come forward.
Point of order, Madam Chair. Is there any way we could put the clock on the screen like we had before? It would assist our delegations to know how much time.
I agree.
Through you, Chair, that's often done through our Zoom, and because we don't have Zoom playing tonight, that's the trouble. So we're left to an iPhone at the moment. I apologize.
Sorry, can you please identify yourself?
It's Ken Hines. I'm a landowner, and I also farm all the land around this lease drain and the Bamberg Creek. And I just wanted to say that I've been fighting a beaver in this creek. They dug this Cook lease drain twice, and they piled the dirt on the ditch bank, and they've trapped water in behind this berm. And the second time they dug it, they piled more. And so I've got 6-8 acres that I can hardly farm now because of the digging of the ditch. The second time was because of a beaver, and they didn't even take the beaver dam out. I took it out numerous times, and they went in there, and all the pictures they've taken, the measurements are with a beaver dam in there. The creek will not flow. I've taken the beaver out. I hired a trapper to trap the beaver. The beaver's gone. The water flows perfectly. I haven't had a problem with any of the land around there not draining because of it, but they take all these measurements with a beaver dam in the creek, and they say it's not flowing properly. So they're spending a lot of money for a beaver, which is not needed. I also want to just say about the drains going up the side of this farm that they're wanting to put in, or a closed drain, and they're going up to sand, where sand doesn't hold water. It'll soak away. So they're spending all this money to put cement tiles in that won't even bring water into it unless it hits the end. And I went to the road the other day and looked at the culvert, and there hasn't been a drop of water gone through that culvert ever. Because there's a berm in front of the culvert, and if water's coming through, it would clear that berm away, and it hasn't. So there's not a water problem there. They're spending all this money for cement tiles that won't even take in water, and they're doing it on the other side too. They could put a 6-inch big O that's perforated down Corey's side. It'll catch that. It'll suck in the water. It could be done for a fraction of the cost. And then if you're putting a 12-inch cement tile into a creek, you could put a 6-inch tile in and the creek is fine. You don't have to dig the creek. But you put a 12-inch tile in, you have to go down 2 feet to try to get a cement tile in. It's not needed. So this is a way over-engineered. To me, it's a money grab, and it's a waste of taxpayers' money and all the people that are around. So, as a farmer, I farm the land, I see what goes on. And there is no problem there. The only problem was the beaver. And that's costing us $500,000. That's what I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Hines. Are there any questions from council?
Thank you, Chair Dunstall. I have a question to you, Mr. Hines. Do you farm the land on the Janana property?
I farm everything around on the Cookley side and on the Bamberg Creek side, even right up to the Janana farm.
But the land in question where the petitioner has made the request, you don't farm that land?
I do not farm that.
Thank you, sir. Are there any other persons in the audience who wish to address council on this matter? I will also note that council has received correspondence relating to this matter, which has been provided to council and included in this meeting's agenda package. Would the clerk please indicate if there is any person present who wishes to address council? For a second and last time, would the clerk please indicate if anyone wishes to address council on this matter? We move on to presentations. We have one presentation this evening, and I will take this opportunity to let the presenters know that they have, nope, we do not. Are there any other questions, council? We have to hold a vote on that matter. All those in favor?
May I interrupt for a second?
Yes.
So there needs to be an opportunity for the petitioner to either add, or sorry, to remove their name or anyone else to add their name too.
Okay, sorry, thank you. If are there any petitioners that would like to add or remove their name? Nope. Seeing none, we move on. So now we will take a vote. All those in favor?
Through you, Chair, prior to voting, maybe just a general comment. I don't have any further questions for any of the presenters or the engineers present, but in general, sort of summarized thinking, I think, is appropriate in this instance. So, through you, Chair, the understanding of the facts as presented to this point is that through the Drainage Act and a petition being submitted, it then creates an administrative course for council to carry out the requirements of a provincial piece of legislation, which is in essence what we are tasked with doing. Through that, the first step is that an engineer is appointed, and the engineer is granted quasi-judicial powers. In essence, their job is to assess the situation and ultimately decide whether or not the petition as presented initially is valid or invalid. Through fact-checking and sound advice, I can confirm that one signature does indeed make a petition valid. The reason the drainage area grew is due to Section 32 of the Drainage Act, which reads, and I quote, "Where, in the opinion of the engineer, the cost of continuing a drainage works to a sufficient outlet or the cost of constructing or improving a drainage works with sufficient capacity to carry off the water will exceed the amount of injury likely to be caused to low-lying lands along the course of or below the termination of the drainage works. Instead of continuing the works to such an outlet or making it of such capacity, the engineer may include in the estimate of cost a sufficient sum to compensate the owners of such low-lying lands for any injuries they may sustain from the drainage works, and in the report the engineer shall determine the amount to be paid to the owners of such low-lying lands in respect of such injuries." The best interpretation I've heard of this particular clause is in essence that an engineer will address the issues in the low-lying area, but can't just leave the water to drain and hope for the best. They have to cure the situation as a whole, which requires upstream and downstream modifications of the land and the drainage so that they can cure the problem, not pass it on so that next season the next farm requires drainage, or after that the next farm requires drainage. That's the cause as to why the drainage area has grown to 220 hectares. The petitioner has every right to build berms and block the water from entering their property, which would then cause additional problems for surrounding neighbors and farms. So to prevent that from happening, and to also prevent water and fertilizer and other waste from running off into these creeks and drainage outlets, the role of the petition is to address all of that. The role of the township, in this case, is to advance and perform the administrative tasks set out by the Drainage Act. We're not technical experts, we are not engineers, but Our task is ultimately to advance the process. And another thing we have to weigh is also the needs of the few versus the needs of the many. And ultimately, turning this down could put the township in a situation where it would face liability, and the costs to that are unknown. I cannot look a taxpayer in the face and tell them that I potentially need to raise their taxes to cover the cost and damages due to a situation that we created by putting us in a liable situation. So based on the facts presented, the best supported decision is one in which council ultimately should uphold the existing petition and advise that if there are parties in opposition, there are routes to appeal, whether that be through court of revision, through a proper appeal channel, which could in turn be a drainage referee or a drainage tribunal. That is all I have to say on this. Is there anyone else who wishes to comment before we proceed to vote?
I will now call the vote to accept the report. All those in favor? That vote carries unanimously. We move on to presentations. We have one presentation this evening, and I will take the opportunity to let the presenters know they have 10 minutes to address council. 10.1, 2022 audited financial statements, Core 2023-36. I will now read the recommendation. That report COR 2023-36 regarding the 2022 audited financial statements be received for information purposes. May I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Martin moves. Councillor Cressman seconds. I will now ask Director Patrick Kelly to speak on this matter.
Thank you, Acting Mayor Dunstall. In accordance with the Municipal Act, the auditor of a municipality shall report to council the audited financial report on an annual basis. Graham Matthew Professional Corporation was engaged to audit the township's financial statements for the year ended December 31st, 2022. And before inviting our auditors to present the outcomes of their audit, I wanted to take an opportunity to thank all staff that have been involved in preparing the township's financial statements, notably efforts of our Deputy Treasurer Astrid Romani and the entire Budget and Finance team. An interim audit occurred in the fall of 2022, with on-site activities occurring in March and April of 2023. The audited financial statements are presented tonight for information purposes and will be posted to the township's public-facing website following this evening's meeting. In accordance with legislative requirements, staff have also completed and submitted our financial information return to the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing prior to the May 31st deadline. This reporting is a prerequisite that municipalities have to remain eligible for external grant funding programs. With that being said, tonight we're joined by Mr. Mike Arndt of Graham Matthew Professional Corporation, who will present the results of the audit carried out by his firm. Mike.
Well, thank you very much, Patrick, for that introduction. Acting Mayor Dunstall, members of council, thank you very much for the invitation to be here tonight to present the results of our audit of the 2022 financial statements for the township. I am pleased once again to have a clean audit report to share with you tonight on the financial statements. I thought I'd start with just a little bit of background process about how the audit is undertaken and the timing and so forth. As Patrick alluded to, we attended on site first in the fall for a day of interim work, and then for the most part in mid-April to take on the actual audit itself. I'd like to thank Patrick and his team for the job they did in providing us with the information we need to complete the audit, including the full financial statements and related note disclosures. Our role as financial statement auditors is really detailed in full in the audit report that's attached to the financial statements. So I would encourage you to review that to get sort of the full flavor of what a financial statement audit entails and what it does not entail. But at a very high level, what we look at is a sample of your accounting records and other documentation that support the amounts and disclosures that management has included in the financial statements. Generally speaking, by looking at third-party documentation to support those representations and disclosures. The majority of our time is spent on, obviously, the larger figures within the statements and areas subject to significant estimates and judgments, things like your accounts payable, or pardon me, your capital assets, accrued liabilities, to name just a couple. As part of the audit, we also review your internal controls on a test basis, and I'm pleased to say we found no significant weaknesses in your internal controls, no evidence of any controls being circumvented or avoided as well. This year, we again only had minor adjustments to the financial statements as a result of our audit, and I'm pleased to say we have no immaterial or unadjusted items that have not been posted into your financial statements. So I think as a council, and in our view, you can be confident that the financial data that you receive during the year is accurate and reliable for your decision-making purposes. As Patrick alluded to, the township has already filed your annual financial information return in advance of the May 31st filing deadline, which will continue to ensure you receive your provincial funding without any interruptions. You may also be aware that the township received the 2021 Financial Information Return Award from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, recognizing the efforts the township makes to report timely and reliable and accurate financial information to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs. Wilmot was one of 15 award winners out of 444 municipalities in the province. So turning now to the financial statements before you, in addition to management's report on the statements, we present our audit opinion, which, as I said, is a clean or unmodified opinion, meaning that, in our view, the financial statements present fairly, in all material respects, the financial position and the operating results of the township for the year ended December 31st, 2022. Now, as you know, the financial statements are presented in accordance with public sector accounting standards, and these standards differ significantly from how the township budgets during the year. So, for example, within the financial statements, you'll see things like amortization expense on your capital assets, which is a non-cash expense of approximately $6.25 million this year. You'll also see your share of net income from your investment in Nova Energy Corporation, this year totaling about $914,000, another non-cash item that's included in your statements. So it's a very different reporting format from how you budget. So with that in mind, what I'd like to do is just speak to some of the financial changes that you see in the statements this year. And I'll start with the couple pages at the front called the 6-year financial review. And what this presents is a high-level summary of various data over the last 6 years for the township. It provides comparative information for things like your total revenues, your total expenses, tax arrears, long-term debt, staffing levels, things of that nature. So it's a handy tool to look at some of the trends and some key factors over the last 6 years. And getting into the statements themselves, a few things to comment on. Your net financial assets remain very strong at $31.8 million. Your taxes receivable this year decreased by 13% over 2022, and that follows on a 29% decrease that was seen in 2021 over the 2020 year. And your tax arrears on a per capita basis are at the lowest level they've been in the last 7 years. So a good sign that you are collecting the taxes owed to you. Your investment in what is now known as Nova Energy Corporation, formerly Kitchener Power Corp. You may recall there was an amalgamation of those hydro utilities this year. It continues to be a very strong performer for the township. The investment this year increased by just over $1.5 million, in part due to a one-time gain of approximately $1.2 million that was recognized on the merger of those two entities. During 2022, that investment provided the township with $540,000 of cash dividends into the township. Over the last 6 years, it's provided you with $2.1 million of dividends to the township. During 2022, you invested $6.2 million into your tangible capital assets and infrastructure within the township, and staff continued with your asset management planning during the year, which continues to provide you as a council with more accurate information about the condition and replacement costs of the township's infrastructure assets, so that as a council you can more accurately plan and understand the timing of the replacement of some of your significant assets. As you know, this year the township undertook about $8.8 million of debt during 2022 to assist with roughly a dozen different capital projects that you have on the go, the largest one being the development of the Wilmot employment lands. And that debt level remains well within the prescribed debt level set by the province, so you're still well below your thresholds there. This year you saw the addition of 10 new staff as well to your staffing base, again reflective of what's really one of the faster growing municipalities within our region. So I think just in conclusion, overall, the township certainly remains in a very stable financial position, despite all the challenges that are obviously imposed on all municipalities with things like rising inflation and interest rates and things of that nature. I would just like to conclude by thanking the staff we have the opportunity to work with during the audit, particularly Sharon and Patrick and the finance team for their efforts and their assistance. Our team certainly appreciates their professionalism during the course of the audit. So with that, happy to
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Does council have any questions or comments? Councillor Cressman?
Excuse me, through you, Acting Mayor. I had the question about ANOVA because I saw our equity didn't increase equal to what our liability increased. And I was wondering about I'm trying to search through here and find the page, but it seemed previously our equity and liability in Kitchener Power Corp were equal, and when the amalgamation occurred, we had more liability than we had equity. Yes, I saw the $1 million. I appreciate that, so don't get me wrong, but
yeah.
Was that part of the...
I'm not sure what liability you're speaking to with ANOVA Energy, Patrick.
Yeah,
I'm not
well,
sure if you have any thoughts on that.
That could be a follow-up question that I could have later that I could have with Patrick.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. To that point, note 6 within the financial statements begins on page 14. Continuing on through page 16 details the change in the investment throughout the course of the year.
One follow-up question. I guess having been on a number of other boards, the audit of a municipality is totally different than what I've been used to in terms of province of Ontario for a board I was chaired, or the Agriculture, Agri-Food Canada for another board that I was responsible and money received. So I guess I asked the question, what steps do you take in terms of being a service provider that is unique to the municipal sector to ensure that, there's always this comment that auditors should always from time to time have a pair of fresh eyes applying it, yet the skill set is very specialized. So I'm trying to, how do you manage that tension?
Yeah, very, very good question. So our firm has been involved with municipal audits for our entire existence, which is bordering on just about 60 years now. So we've had through our staff and so forth that have worked on a number of different municipal audits over the years. I think built a fairly strong knowledge base, particularly with different municipalities in the Waterloo region. So I think that's something that sets us apart a little bit. One thing we really pride ourselves on as a firm is staff continuity. So being able to, what that does is it allows us the opportunity to be able to get familiar with your operations rather than constantly rotating through new faces all the time. That said, and Patrick would be able to attest to this, we've had a number of new faces over the last couple of years. But one thing we're also very cognizant of is we're very hesitant to use very green and fresh students, if I can say that with all due respect. Our staff that we have on the audit are all professionally designated accountants. And I think that's an important thing as well. And with that, adding some of that new blood to our team, they're seeing some of the new fresh things that are going on, teaching methods, auditing methods, and knowledge base as well. We often say that sometimes our smartest staff are the ones that have just wrote all the exams because they've just studied everything. So I think that's one way a couple of ways that we try to bring that value to the township.
maybe you're being a little modest. I saw your degree from Laurier wasn't that far ago, if I remember.
Well, maybe the gray hair is starting to give me away, though, a little bit.
No other comments? Oh, Councillor Martin?
Through you, Acting Mayor Dunstall, thank you, Mr. Arndt, for your report. I'm just kind of curious, and maybe my question seems so basic, but the word redacted, what does that mean? I'm just kind of curious why we're using redacted.
Redacted?
Yes, it says client financial statements redacted, trust financial statements redacted.
I can answer that.
Yeah, please.
Sure. Through you, Acting Mayor Dunstall, the redacted is in the title of the document. That's because of the expertise of our clerks group. There's signatures on those documents, so you'll see in the printout of them the signatures of myself and Ms. Chambers and Mr. Arndt have all been redacted from the document, so the public-facing one doesn't have our signatures on it.
Oh, okay, so the redacted is only for signatures?
So redacted is referring to the blacking out or covering up of signatures on the document. I can confirm there was nothing else redacted from those statements prior to being given to council.
Any further statements or questions? Yes, Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. No questions directly, but more so just a general comment. I was reminded this weekend through a variety of different conversations with our citizens and peers and friends. One thing that stands out to me is when we look at the taxes that we collect as a township, I'm reminded consistently that the taxation that goes towards the township is just shy of 10 million. But there are some large transfers that go to the regional and school board level. So I would highlight that almost 20 million goes to the region and 7 million goes to school boards. Rough estimates, of course, but I'd like to remind the general citizens that while we have our name in the collection envelope, at the end of the day, we do transfer a lot of those funds out. But in general, everything looks great, so thank you.
Well said, Councillor Wilkinson. Councillor Cressman?
Yes, I found this 6-year comparison very useful at the front, and I did my percentage calculation. I mean, it's a dangerous thing to do because I've seen a humorist on YouTube last night talking about how you can use statistics to lead you to the wrong conclusions. But that being aside, I think you highlighted the growth of 10 employees in the township, and then hopefully as a township we will see the assessment growth from the investment that we made in the employment plans and some of the housing that will come on stream, because without that happening, then it just becomes an increased burden. I'm not a burden, I'm not just, I better rephrase. Redact that, please. But I think it has to be in balance with growth in our revenues as a township as well. So I think those were some of the things as well. I think the expenditures, and again, I'm just comparing it to 2017. There was sizable growth there last year as compared to 2017. It was expressed over 2017. And again, I think inflation had a big piece to do with that. But again, we have to keep those in mind as we try to look forward to next year's budget and our ability to bring that into line with expenditures.
Any more questions or comments? No?
Through you, Acting Mayor Dunstall, no, thank you for the comments, and you're hitting some key points there, which is great for both council to understand and for the public to hear about. A piece that you talked about is the assessment growth, which is going to be a lagging indicator for the township. So you're seeing some of these capital outlays, some of these additional expenditures happening to get us ready for that impending growth. So it is a good idea to keep an eye on that as we move forward. And then also with regards to moving into, I think we're already in budget season for next year, keeping those keeping those issues top of mind. We continue to work internally as a team and with consultants on our debt management, reserve fund, and investment strategy pieces, which all encompass kind of a fiscal strategy that we're going to look to bring forward as we head into the budget process, to recognize all of those impacts lead to what ultimately is that bottom line, as you referred to at the start of your comments, percentage, which is one I've cautioned against focusing on. I like focusing on dollars, but all valid points, and appreciate your insights, Councillor Cressman.
Any further questions or comments? Thank you, Mr. Arndt, for your presentation. I will now call the vote. All those in favor of accepting report 2020, the audited financial statement for 2022, COR 2023-36. All in favor? And that carries unanimously. We will now move on to the consent agenda. If members of council have any questions and want to remove an item from the consent agenda, please indicate so now, as we will not take questions on consent items unless the items are requested to be moved to the regular agenda. I will now read the recommendation that consent agenda items 11.1, 11.2, 11.3, and 11.4 be approved. May I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Sadhu, seconded by Councillor Martin. I will now call for the vote. All those in favor? That carries unanimously. Reports, there are none. Correspondence. The Township received correspondence which is attached to the agenda. Does any member of council wish to discuss any of the correspondence items? Councillor Sadhu?
I would just like to highlight the correspondence received by Mr. Gord Mills, president of the local New Hamburg Firebirds. I see they are asking for some financial aid due to some circumstances out of their control and some new information to light. So I would ask if staff can come back with the report at our next meeting, highlighting some potential financial aids that we can provide.
Through you, Acting Mayor, for council to consider any items that were not printed on the agenda, you would need to waive notice. So that is a requirement under our rules of procedure. And what that's doing is allowing then council to have those discussions and move any motions as you're suggesting. So that motion would require a 2/3 majority of the members present. And if you would like, Mayor or Acting Mayor, I could read out a recommendation for you.
Please.
So the recommendation would be that in accordance with section 7.12.7 of the rules of procedure, notice be waived to consider correspondence received by Gord Mills of the New Hamburg Firebirds regarding the request for council support.
All those in favor? Oh, 1 minute. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Rippleton, seconded by Councillor Cressman. All those in favor? That moves unanimously.
So now, Mayor, through you, or Acting Mayor, I apologize. If the councillor would like to move your motion, you can do that now.
Yeah, so I'd like to move the motion that direct staff to come back at our next meeting, I believe is July 24th, with a report on potential financial aids that can be provided to the Firebirds.
Need a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Sadhu, seconded by Councillor Wilkinson. All those in favor?
I have a question before we...
Yes.
Thank you. Through you, Acting Mayor Dunstall. So first of all, I just want to mention that I have a conflict of interest, so I wouldn't be voting on this, and that's for being the safety... I always get the title confused, but the safety officer for the New Hamburg Firebirds, and so I won't vote on this motion. But I did want to bring up discussion around this. This has come about because of the past practice regarding lottery. And I've been approached, and my understanding is a number of other councillors have been approached by members of the community and members of the Firebirds Board of Directors or Association, raising concerns that the township staff have not acted appropriately in terms of the lottery. And so I do have a question to you, Clerk Bunn, if you would be able to give an overview of the rules around lotteries, And it's my understanding that if we don't act appropriately, we could put the township at risk for criminal charges, we could put individuals at risk for criminal charges. And so we are obligated under the provincial rules to follow the rules of that. And in this conversation, I also want to thank the township staff. I did this afternoon speak with Deputy Clerk Curtis, and also, oh gosh, Candace, I'm not even sure of your title. Sorry? Admin Clerk, and also spoke with Admin Clerk Candace Greenlee. And in my opinion, they have been very accommodating and have worked hard to try to offer solutions to the New Hamburg Firebirds over the past 6 months. So I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, so through you, Acting Mayor, certainly we try our best to work with our community partners, and you are correct. The framework for licensing in Ontario starts at the very top with the Criminal Code of Canada. So the Criminal Code does regulate gaming in the country. Then you take your next step down to the province and the provincial level, and there is Order in Council 1413-08, if we would like to get technical, as well as the Ontario Gaming Act. So both two pieces of legislation, and again a framework for regulating lotteries within the province. And from that, the Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario is who actually administers, on behalf of the Government of Ontario, all the rules and regulations around lotteries. So as a municipality, we're given a guide or a policy manual. It's called the Lottery Policy Manual, so it's pretty straightforward, that we are obliged to follow. So those rules are set by the provincial level, and we are given them to implement and to work with community partners to ensure that they are eligible. That policy manual gives us a very strict criteria of what is eligible and what is not eligible in terms of receiving a lottery license, with very little to no flexibility for the municipality. So in the case of where we are right now, an eligibility review was done, and unfortunately the organization was deemed to be ineligible at the moment for a lottery license. So again, it's unfortunate. It's not obviously where we'd want to be. We would like to work with our community partners, as I've mentioned, but we are bound to follow those rules as they're written. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, if we can, all those in agreement. Okay, that passes. I will now read the recommendation for bylaws. Recommendation that bylaw 2023-23 at item 14.1 is attached to this agenda be read a third and final time and finally passed in open council, and that bylaw 2023-XX at item 14.2 is attached to this agenda be read for a first and second time and be brought back to council at a future date for a third reading, and further that bylaw 2023-XX at time 14.3 as attached to this agenda be read for a first and second time and third time and finally passed in open council. May I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Wilkinson, seconded by Councillor Sadhu. I will now call for the vote. All in favor? The motion carries. Notice of motions, there are none. Announcements? Are there any announcements? Councillor Martin.
Thank you, through you, Acting Mayor Dunstall, and I must say you've done a wonderful job as Acting Mayor tonight. Thank you for your work.
Thank you.
My announcements are regarding Canada Day, and that is, it's hard to believe, but it's coming up this Saturday. So it's my understanding that we have at least 2 Canada Day celebrations in Wilmot Township. And the one is going to be at the Normas Hill Park. And to find out details about the schedule, I believe it starts already at 6 a.m. There's a sunrise ceremony led by a local Indigenous group. And if you go to the Facebook page of Canada Day in Wilmot, you can find information regarding the schedule for that. Another Canada Day celebration is put on by the Legion, and if you go to the New Hamburg Legion, Facebook page. Did I get that right? Yes, thank you. And you can find out the information about that. So I just wanted to highlight.
Great, thank you. Business arising from closed session, there's none. Confirmatory bylaw, I will now read the recommendation that the confirmatory bylaw as attached to this agenda be read a first, second, and third time, and finally passed in open council. May I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Martin. All those in favor? That passes. Adjournment. I will now read the recommendation that we now adjourn to meet again at the call of the mayor. May I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Cressman and seconded by Councillor Martin. I will now call for the vote. All those in favor? And the motion carries.